This discussion has elicited a lot of heat, not always a lot of light, a lot of disagreement among believers over the years. So, how should we think about faith and reason? Very broadly, we can distinguish two approaches. One approach would maintain faith and reason are mutually incompatible. If you have faith, you cannot use reason. If you use reason, you cannot have faith. And the statement by Mark Twain illustrates this approach. Having faith is believing in something that you just know ain't true. Having faith is believing in something that you know it just can't be true. That's one approach to faith. Another approach says that faith and reason are not mutually incompatible. You can exercise both faith and reason simultaneously, but the relationship between them is tricky. And here we typically go back to Augustine and then Anselm, the earlier theologians, who used the expression or formula faith seeking understanding as expressing what they're about. And most theologians, most thinkers in the Christian tradition would put themselves somewhere in that camp. Faith and reason are not incompatible. You need both, but the relationship between them is a bit tricky. Let's just think about the English word faith. By itself, it's a bit ambiguous. On the one hand, it can refer to intellectual assent to or acceptance of what God has revealed. Sometimes we speak of this as belief that. Latin terms sometimes help us here. Fides would be a term. Here, I believe in God is equivalent to saying, I believe that there is a God. So think of Gallup or another pollster coming around and asking questions. Do you believe in God? And you check, yes, I believe that there is a God. That would be fides. That would be this first approach. A second approach, though, goes beyond that. And here we use the term fiducia. This is an attitude or a dispositional approach that involves trust. And faith as fiducia is more than simply accepting propositional belief. It includes the will, a volition of trust in the object of faith. So if you ask somebody, do you believe in God? And you have this kind of faith in mind, you're asking whether you entrust yourself to God. Not simply do you believe that there is a God, but that your whole being is somehow entrusted to God. So notice here that there's a little asymmetry here. You can have fides, you can have fiducia without fides. You cannot have fides without fiducia. I can believe that there is a God without entrusting myself volitionally to God, but I cannot entrust myself volitionally to God unless I believe that there is a God. So the two are related in that kind of asymmetrical way. Now, I think there's also a third dimension here in faith. So you have belief in certain beliefs about God that you accept. You trust in God, but then according to Scripture, you also walk in obedience to God. The English word faith picks up on passages and motifs throughout Scripture that link professing belief with actual obedience to what God has commanded. So I see faith as involving all three of these. Belief in certain propositions, trust in God, and then obedience to what God has revealed. So with that understanding of faith, then let's ask about reason. And again, there are a lot of different ways you can define reason. You can define reason in such a way that it is antithetical to faith, and that's the way often the term is defined. But by reason, I simply mean all of our faculties relevant to gaining knowledge and justifying our beliefs about different things. And we all have a number of different human faculties. I mean, we have our five senses, and through the five senses, I can see the world around me. I can touch things. I can hear things. We have memory. We have the logical abilities that enable us to draw identity relationships between things. If A is bigger than B is bigger than C, then I know that A is bigger than C, and so on. All of these things are gifts of God in creation. And it's very important, I think, to emphasize that. Reason is not the product of the fall. God created human beings with the capacity to identify relationships, to recognize truth, to make inferences, and this is how we live. Now, of course, reason has been affected by the fall, and just like every other aspect of the human organism, our bodies, our will, our memory, our desires, sin has affected every aspect of the human organism, including reason. But it has not eradicated reason. It has not vitiated reason. And so um, we can still use reason to make identity judgments, to recognize truth, and to discern things in the world around us. Now, again, the important thing to see here, as I have talked about this, is reason is a gift of God. It's not a product of sin. It's not a product of the fall. It's a gift of God, although it has been affected by the fall. Now, if you understand faith and reason this way, I think we should be able to see that not only are they not incompatible, but you really cannot exercise faith without using reason in some sense. And let me try and illustrate this. Sometimes somebody will say, well, I don't rely upon reason. I simply accept the gospel and biblical teaching by faith, and I don't use reason at all. Reason doesn't enter into this. It's simply an act of faith. But we need to step back and ask a couple of questions. How do we understand the gospel? Well, we understand the gospel by hearing the gospel. And ultimately, we understand the gospel through encountering the gospel through Scripture. Scripture is included in book form for us in the 21st century. It wasn't always this way, but today we have the canonical books in one book, cover to cover, maybe a nice leather cover, red letter edition, or something like that. That's a physical object, among other things. So you say, how do I understand the gospel? Well, by reading the Bible. What is the Bible? Well, among other things, the Bible is a physical object. I open up the Bible, and let's say I open it up to John chapter 3. For God so loved the world. I see black ink marks on white pages, and because of my training and understanding in English, I'm able to look at those ink markings on the page and recognize that as the English language and put together the sentence, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, and so on. All of that involves the use of reason, recognizing the physical object of the Bible as a book to be read, opening the pages, recognizing the print on the page, because of the training that I have, being able to interpret the markings on the page as communicating to me elements of the gospel. All of that includes the use of reason. And so it's not a question of, do I either rely upon faith or do I rely upon reason? I use both. I use both. Now, again, faith moves us beyond simply intellectual assent and understanding. And faith involves the element of the will, a volitional response to live and act in obedience to what God has revealed. And so faith does include more than reason. But there's a very intimate relationship between the two, and we should be very careful of playing one off against the other. In conclusion, I mean, this is a deep subject. A lot has been written on it, and people will nuance things in different ways. But I think it's helpful to think about faith and reason as both gifts of God, and to really understand and respond appropriately to God, we need to exercise both faith and reason. And of course, we can abuse faith, we can abuse reason, but a disciplined, biblically framed understanding of faith and reason together can help us to appreciate and honor God.